Okay, I want to run quickly through these things, right? These things. Let me move this so that light's not behind me. I want to run quickly through how to get your wrists to dissipate pain. And we have to think about this not as an instant gratification thing, but as a work in progress and as something that you're going to have to continually do. So we talk about, knees and ankles and hips and things like that. And when you lock out your knee, we know that we're not supposed to be doing that because we want those muscles. So like, let's say you're doing a deadlift. You don't lock out your leg and do that deadlift, right? You have a slight knee bend in that leg, so your muscles do the work. Now, that's the same thing here with the wrists in push-ups, right? So, except in push-ups, we're doing the opposite. So what happens is, here's normal, right? That's normal or neutral. And what happens is, that happens. So you don't use any of the muscles in that forearm or in the hand, and you say, hey, joint, do all this, when you don't really say that for anything else. Right? We kind of know that if you just lock out your leg and stand on it, that's not very good for it. But we don't think about that when we're in that push-up position with our hand on the ground. And we basically just lock out that hand in this position and say, okay, that's your job now, wrist. And what happens is your wrist starts to hurt and you get this impact because you're putting body weight on that wrist, that little baby joint. This is pretty big, like that hip joint is pretty big, that knee joint is pretty big relative to this guy. And so when I put all my weight on that leg or on this leg, that's not as big of a deal as when I do that on my hand. Hey. Excuse us. We're very impolite here. So when you put all that pressure on that wrist, it acts accordingly, right? And it hurts, it starts to hurt. And so one of the things that you can do to begin with is to make sure that wrist lines up under the shoulder, right? So a lot of people, if this is the floor, a lot of people put that hand out here. So now when that wrist goes flat, it's actually like pushing, gravity is pushing that weight into that wrist, into that joint. Now if I get my hand underneath my shoulder, I can dissipate that force, right? So if I try to stand, let's do this. If I try to stand on this leg and it's out in front of me, hold on. Nope. If I try to stand and my leg is out in front of me, it's gonna be really hard to stand there, right? And I'm gonna put pressure on that hip a lot to stay in that position, in that lower back, right? Same thing applies here. If I put my hand out in front of me and I try to do that same thing, that wrist is taking a lot more pressure. Same thing if I put it underneath me here, right? Behind me. So I wanna get it on top of, or underneath that shoulder so that force goes straight down so it's dissipated between the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder. Hi, buddy. And so that's step number one. Step number two, all right? Now what I want to do is little tiny bend, right? Little tiny bend here. So instead of it being all like this, I actually kind of want to pull it forward and start grabbing with my hand, right? What that will do is start to turn on the muscles in the forearm. So if you watch this real close, right? So nothing. I don't know if you can see that. All right. So here, I've got nothing. But here, when you see that happen, you start to see those muscles tense up a little bit, right? So now I'm going to use the muscles in my arm to help my wrist, right? Which is what a lot of you guys aren't doing. So one simple task is sticking that hand directly underneath the shoulder, not out in front, not below it. Right? Not out to the side, right? The other thing to do is little tiny bend that elbow and kind of grab with your fingers Another thing you can do is put some dumbbells underneath you and keep your wrist neutral, right? So again, it's that under that principle of like dissipating the force between the wrist, the ankle, the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder, right? And then one last tip is to think about when your hands are on the ground, is to think about turning it out a little bit. So if I turn my hand out ever so slightly, like I'm grabbing the ground and twisting the ground, like I'm tearing a jar off, starts to dissipate some force into that wrist as well. So I know that was a slightly long video, but hopefully you have a couple different options there. And again, this is not a quick fix. This is something you have to work on, and then that pain will go away. A lot of you guys probably haven't put a lot of pressure on in that position for a long time, and that's okay. And a lot of you guys maybe have, and you've just been winging it and been hurt this whole time. So here are some solutions to that, and try some of them, right? Try that placement, try that, and see if they help you a little bit, because we need to start to get those muscles to hold ourselves up and not just that joint.